Good morning, y'all. Bundled up this morning. It's about 9 with the wind chill here in Ohio. So let me start with some of the thoughts that I was having since the last video. And one of the things that I had whispered to myself was, I don't have to be a Christian to be a disciple of Jesus. I don't have to be claiming I'm a Christian in order to follow Jesus' teachings. Jesus was not a Christian. And God and Jesus did not turn their backs on me. I turned my back on them when the church hurt me, especially after my grandfather had died. And, I was alone and I saw my grandmother alone. And I had just started dating this girl that was from the North Georgia mountains. And I've not mentioned her name through any of my story. I won't. But this is kind of what started everything. Some of my family members had hated me because my grandparents had decided to leave me over the estate and over my grandmother. So I had this stress of dealing with a major loss of my grandfather, who had taught me how to ride a bike without training wheels, drive a car, do maintenance on a car. He taught me how to garden. He taught me how to do all these things, and he was such a major father figure in my life. And so there I was trying to grieve, losing him, and then taking care of my grandmother's needs. After losing the man that she was married to for over 50 years, and including her grief and her dementia and the estate. And then here was this new relationship that this girl had quit her job after working in the same place for 10 years, the week that my grandfather passed away. And that should have been a red flag. But you don't really notice red flags when you're grieving. I mean, basically, you're wanting somebody to be there and support you and comfort you. And she was good at doing that. My granddad did not have a lot of cash in the bank. So what he did have, I withdrew it and I put it into a safety deposit box, like he'd asked me to do, to keep people from taking my grandmother up to the bank after he died and pulling it out. So my grandmother was totally losing her mind in their house after he passed away. The dementia was still mild, but it was enough where she was scattering her medications across the floor, forgetting what she had taken. And I knew if I left her in that house that she would die. And so we started having the hard talk about her going into assisted living. Now, just let me say something here on my defense, because of what I had been charged with, is if I didn't care about her, if I was only there to steal from her, then I would have left her in that house to die, because then I would have profited from that. I would have had a house and 10 acres in the clear, and that wasn't my concern. I knew that she needed 24-hour care and a facility with a staff that could handle things more than I could. So we started looking, and the rent was around $4,000 for a really nice assisted living. And, she agreed at that time that would be the best decision. So we found a place, and I held her hand as we walked in the facility to meet the coordinator. And Karen was a really sweet woman, and she showed us around the whole place and, told us what they would offer, my grandmother, to keep her safe. And I thought it was a beautiful idea. I felt like if she was in a community with other people her age who had been through similar things, that she could actually thrive and get through the grief. They told her that she could be moving in within a couple of weeks. So here I was overseeing selling her home, that she had raised her kids, her grandkids, and had watched her husband of over 50 years take his last breath. And all this was so stressful for me. And I had already suffered from severe PTSD from a childhood of trauma and years working on an ambulance. And now the symptoms were resurfacing. And so I was relying on this new girlfriend for a lot of getting me around and driving and stuff. So, um, my grandmother seemed to have been happy to go where she was going. And she just said, Britt, I just want to leave all this old stuff and I want to get brand new stuff and I want to start all over, which made sense. And my heart was just breaking for her. My granddaddy had left um, me a farmhouse that he grew up in, and it was on the same property with theirs. I mean, the properties met, and he had signed that house over to me before he died. And I loved the house, but I hated Rome, Georgia. And I wanted to get as far away as I could and start over. And so I felt like if I was able to move a couple of hours away, that I could heal from all the damage that had been done to me over the years. So me and the girlfriend had decided that we would buy us a house in northeast Georgia. And I just thought this was the answer to all my hurt and to all my grief and pain. And little did I know that this was just the beginning to the worst nightmare anyone could have imagined. And as I was in my thoughts, it was click, click, click. Day room is open. Please keep your voices down. Clean out your cells. So I did my normal run down to the stairs to grab a phone and call my dad to see if there was anything new. So Dad answers the phone. Hello. I was like, hey, Dad, have you heard anything new? And he said, well, your attorney said you should be out of there in a few days. And that Floyd County has already made arrangements to have you picked up. And that's why they wouldn't release you and let you fly yourself home and turn yourself in. And he said, so let them pay the bill if they wanted to. And I said, Dad, I didn't do anything wrong. I said, Grandmom gave me permission to do everything that I did with that money and get the things that she needed, that I needed. And I said I had full power of attorney over her, and we had joint bank accounts. And I said, I don't understand how they can press these charges on me. And he said, well, they've added some more charges, because that's what they do. They charge you for something, and then once they get you, then they can add more charges. And so they were giving me, the charge was exploitation of the elderly. And when my dad told me that, I didn't realize the seriousness of it. It was a charge that carried 20 years, due 10. But all I could say was, Dad, I hate it in here. You don't know how bad it is. I need to get out of here. And he just would keep, reminding me they can't keep you forever. And just hang on tight for another day. And when you get back here, you'll bond out. And I trusted that what he was telling me was true, but then there was still that feeling in my gut again that was fighting against what he was saying to comfort me. That's really not how it was going to happen. So I hung up with him and I called my sister. And I was like, hey, and she said, hey, how are you? And same thing. It's what I wanted to tell everybody when I would get on the phone, and how horrible it was in there without giving the detail, because I was afraid to give the detail. You had the desk right to your shoulder with the deputy, and I just always felt like she was sitting there listening to my conversations. But my sister said, I'm going to call the, the Floyd County Jail on three-way and just ask them about if they know when you're going to be picked up. Because that was the thing in there. You're just sitting in there wondering, you're going to be picked up and transported, but you don't know when. And nobody will tell you anything. So I took my glasses off, and I looked down at this pencil that I was gripping, and I was just getting so paranoid, like I was hiding something, even though I wasn't hiding anything, just by the way I was being looked at as I was having general conversation. And so my sister clicked back over, and she said, hey, she said, they've hired a company to pick you up. She said, that's all that they're going to tell me. And I just said, well, thank you so much. And she said, is there anybody else that I can call? And, we had found a way to do this sort of trick of me calling her collect and then her calling anybody on three-way. So there wasn't these collect calls, or it didn't put me in a place to try to call people who I couldn't call. And so I'd ask her to call my stepmom. And so, but she was at work, and so I called her, and I just told her that I'd had that dream about her mom, and that she had brought me food because I was starving in there. And she just kind of confirmed it. She said, yeah, I'm sure that was her, because she would definitely try to get food to you in there. And so I just said, I love you. Please pray for me. And she said, I'm praying for you. And she said, and I have a lot of other people that are also praying for you. And she said, you're going to get out soon. So I let them both go. And then it almost made me feel worse when I heard voices of the people that I love back home, and knowing that they heard me feeling hopeless and helpless. So I was about to get up from my stool, and I just heard, Weeks, come here. So I walk over to the desk, and I thought that I was getting some news about Georgia on their way to pick me up. And so I had this huge smile on my face, and I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, here's your Bible you had requested from the chaplain's office. So I was getting a Bible instead of news that I was going to be taken home. And I want to show you, this is it. This is the exact Bible that I was given. And if you look on the back, it's got a verse in Proverbs 3, 5 and 6. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lead not into your own understanding. In your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. And so it's like rescued, but not arrested. And that kind of pissed me off when I first read it. But now that I look back on it, it's true. And also there's this piece of paper that I continue to talk about throughout my story. And this is a list, and it's dirty and it's faded, of the phone numbers and some of the doodling I did when I was sitting on the phone. But I would take it and I would roll it up like that around that 2-inch pencil, and I would grip it, and I would pace the floors in my cell when I knew it was time to get out. And it was like, I couldn't wait to get out and call these people. And so, like I said, it's faded. You can hardly see it, but that's a huge part of my story in there. What if it did take me going to jail to reconnect with Jesus again? It'd been a long time since I allowed him to work in my heart and really follow his teachings. And because I'd spent those 3 years after my grandfather had died just being so damn angry and bitter and shut down. And I wanted to feel that connection with that Christ spirit again because it brought me peace. And not only did it bring me peace, but it gave those peace to it gave the peace to those around me that I was serving. And I miss that because to me that was a richness that you could not buy with money. And then I randomly opened the Bible and I read in just a little while, he who is coming will not delay. And that was in Hebrews. And I just knew that God was confirming that my transport back to Georgia would be soon and it wouldn't be long. And I was so excited after reading that first verse that I came to that I didn't realize that I had been making my life about my wishes and not God's plan for me. So I opened some more scripture and read them throughout the day. It looked like after that day room time, we were down for another lockdown, and I'd be stuck in that cell without a roommate, a phone, sunshine, food. But I did have that Bible to read and a mouth to start praying with. After I finished reading, I turned over and faced the cinder block brick wall, and I had another memory of my grandparents. And it was when I had just moved back to Rome. I had just completed EMT school. It was in 2007. And my grandparents had this 1978 single wide trailer still on their property that was actually my great grandfather's, who had been dead for like 10 years. And I asked if I could move in it, clean it up, and move in it. And, I was looking forward to the solitude and the nature and the connection with the earth. And I didn't have a place to live at the time. I thought it'd be a great place for me and my son. So they gave me permission. And the property next to me was owned by two gay men. And it was just a little outbuilding. And one of the men had showed up with it on his lawnmower. And I walked over and introduced myself. And, I said, hey, I said, I'm Britt. And I said, Raymond and Billy are my grandparents. And he was riding on his lawnmower. He was covered in sweat. And he had this hairy chest with this gold charm all tangled up in the hair. And he said, my name is Grayson. He said, I live on the other side of these woods. He said, but this building is mine. And he said, I try to keep the grass mowed. So he took an earbud out of his ear and he said, here, I want you to listen to this song. And it was like, damn, you's a sexy bitch. That song had just come out. And I handed it back to him and I smiled. And he said, I'm a hairdresser. And he said, your hair looks so good. And he said, won't you come let me do some highlights, girl? He said, I'll put some sun in on that. And I said, okay. And not thinking anything would come above it. So, and I just tried not to laugh in his face because I was thinking sun in was something from the 80s. That was not. Anyway, so I just left him where he was. He was cutting the grass, and he also had hired my granddad to cut the higher part of the grass that was more of a field area, so my granddad could use it with the bush hog and the tractor. So I drove up to my grandparents' house after that, and I thought I'm gonna play a joke on Granddad. And me and my grandmother were like that, and then would very rarely say we were just kidding. And we would, this is something my family always did within each other, and would tease my grandmother, would tease my granddad, and would just go on with the joke. And so my granddad was in his recliner, and my grandmother was on the sofa, and I sat down in a chair across from them. That's kind of where I'd sit and tell them stories from the day and anything that I knew would get their attention. So they both knew he was gay, and they didn't care about that. I mean, they were actually the only ones in my family that really accepted me when I first come out, and they just loved me anyway. So neither one of them were homophobic. And um, I said, Granddad, I said, Grayson said he was going to come over here and trim your bush. And my grandmother knew what I was trying to do, and she couldn't keep a straight face. And he said, I don't need my damn bush trimmed. And I left the room with Grandma, and we were laughing so hard. And a few days went by, and Grayson started calling her home. And Granddad was at work, so when he would come home, my grandmother would say, well, he keeps trying to get in touch with you. But he was actually trying to get in touch with me to see if I wanted that appointment to get sun in my hair. So, but my granddad would see it on the caller ID, and um, we would just keep going, on and on, and say, well, he just keeps trying to call, see if you want him to come over here and trim your bush. And after that, I mean, it was kind of funny, It was like he he'd just get so mad about it. I don't know, but that was another funny memory I had of them.